Well, for more on U.S. tax reform, let's bring in Gordon Gray, Director of Fiscal Policy at American Action Forum. Welcome back to the show.
Thanks so much for having me.
Now, obviously, Trump's plan at this point is still just a proposal.
It is.
It looked thin, 9 pages, including the cover page, a little light on details. What was your reaction to the key parts of the plan?
So I think the proposal included plenty to like, some proposals that were less likable, but mostly it left a lot unsaid, and that's going to be the job of the tax writing committees, Ways and Means, Senate Finance, to do the real hard work of reform. I think that's when we'll know a lot more about this tax reform and be able to evaluate whether or not it's good tax policy. So I'm optimistic, but there's a lot of work that remains to be done.
What do you think some of the key sticking points might be?
The pay-fors. Those are always the sticking points. Those are the provisions that divide the business community, and those are the reasons why tax reform hasn't happened in over 30 years.
Now let's also look at this idea of needing bipartisan support. Looking at the proposal, how likely are we to see that?
Again, I'm cautiously optimistic. You saw a political statement out of the Minority Leader, Chuck Schumer, but that kind of posturing leaves open the possibility that when you get down to that committee level where you have members actually doing the work of tax reform, negotiating with other members of the committees, that there's an opportunity for bipartisanship. I'm still optimistic on that.
Now, this is a huge undertaking, so give us an idea of just how important is tax reform when it comes to U.S. growth, and especially in light of some of the goals that Trump has set.
Sure, absolutely. The U.S. has been growing at a pace historically post-war that doubles the standard of living after about 35 years. Going forward, we're slated to grow at a rate that would push that out to 75 years. So the American dream, as we understand it, is being pushed beyond the horizon. Tax reform is a way to get back to that rate of growth, to actually make the American dream achievable. We need to grow the economy.
Now, we have seen job growth. It's been slow and steady under Obama and now under Trump. But what policies do you think could really accelerate growth, especially since wage growth seems to be so stagnant?
Absolutely. So the lead-in alluded to some of this. The U.S. does have a very high corporate tax rate. That does affect wages. That does affect workers. There's a lot of important economic research on this, that the corporate rate does actually get levied to some degree on workers. So you cut the corporate rate, it makes sense. The places where folks are working has more money to pay them. That's an important part of the proposal that we saw today, and I hope it makes it into law. Now,
some people may wonder if these companies are getting bigger tax breaks. Does that necessarily mean, though, that it'll trickle down to the workers?
See, I wouldn't call it trickle-down economics. I think it just makes basic sense. If you tax places where people work, then you're going to introduce bad incentives. They're going to get paid less. So I think it makes a lot of sense to make us more competitive in this international economy. Cutting the corporate rate is an important part of that.
Now, how important is this passing of the tax reform when it comes to some of the other big initiatives, especially infrastructure?
Well, I think that it's important for the Congress to demonstrate that it can achieve legislative goals. I think that it would be, I think we could build a lot of momentum towards an infrastructure plan if they were able to do this on a bipartisan basis. But I think so long as the need to do infrastructure remains, and there certainly is a lot of interest on both sides of the aisle, whether or not tax reform passes or fails, I think there'll still be an appetite to do it. The country will be better off, the economy will be better off if we have a functioning tax code to do the infrastructure reform in, but that certainly remains to be seen.
And looking at the health overall of the U.S. economy, how would you describe it, and what could some potential headwinds be?
Well, I think the failure to pursue pro-growth policies, like I said, we're growing at around 2% in real terms. If you continue on that growth trajectory, American families, American workers are going to suffer in the long term, and so I think policymakers on both sides of the aisle, it's incumbent upon them to pursue policies that will raise our rate of growth.
All right, well, thank you so much, Gordon Gray, Director of Fiscal Policy at American Action Forum.